What's good, YouTubers and YouTubettes? This is JBsports back again with another one. Danny Swift Garcia is sitting in the catbird seat. The WBC President Jose Sulaiman recently came out and said that the Errol Spence Shawn Porter winner in all probability will have to face his mandatory next. Whoever wins that fight would have to face that mandatory next. And when you look at the rankings, Danny Garcia is ranked number 1. So he is in prime position to get the winner of that fight. Now I know you'll say, wait a minute, JB Sports. You know, you've been hearing that both Errol Spence and Shawn Porter have been saying if they win their fight, that they're going to fight Manny Pacquiao next. Now, what I think is going to happen is if Errol Spence wins, he beats Shawn Showtime Porter, and he wants to fight Pacquiao, and Pacquiao decides to fight Errol Spence, I don't think the WBC will stand in the way of that fight. There's too much money on the line for that fight. That's a big money fight. Outside of Floyd Mayweather, Errol Spence is the biggest money fight out there for Manny Pacquiao. They could do a big fight at AT&T Stadium. You could put over 70 to 80,000 fans in there. It would do good pay-per-view numbers. I projected it'll probably do around 750,000 pay-per-views at minimum. Could do more. So that they might not stand in the way of a money fight like that. They might give it an exception. If Errol Spence and Al Heyman apply for exception, they might give an exception for that fight. Now, if Shawn Porter wins the fight, now that's a crapshoot there. They might not want to step aside for that fight. That fight is, if Shawn Showtime Porter wins that fight, him and Manny Pacquiao fight, you know, that fight will probably do about what Keith Thurman fight did, maybe even a little less, because Keith Thurman, people don't want to give him credit for that, but he had a great mouthpiece for that fight. He talked a good game, sold the fight, and that fight ended up doing around 500,000. He's got a good persona. Now, Shawn Showtime Porter is trying to do that actually in the Errol Spence fight leading up to the fight. He's doing a lot of talking, doing a lot of self-promotion, and he's trying to show that he has the personality to sell the fight. As he got up there at the last press conference and told him, don't turn my music off. I want to talk. Keep the music going. And he was saying, what time is it? Showtime. What time is it? Showtime. As he had some fans out there. So he's trying to get that persona and get that mouthpiece like Danny Garcia, like Keith Thurman had, and even Adrian Broner had when they fought Pacquiao. So maybe if he can produce some big numbers with Errol Spence, maybe him in a Pacquiao fight, they might if they apply for exception like Errol Spence would do, maybe they would allow that fight to take place over the mandatory. Maybe, but I don't have the same confidence if I have with Errol Spence. Simple the fact that Shawn Showtime Porter is not the draw. As you looked at his last fight with Ugas, they had a sparse crowd out there. Didn't have a lot of people out there. The ratings wasn't that great, so he doesn't have the fan base that Errol Spence has, and even though he don't do the TV ratings like Keith Thurman has done in his fights, so that could cause a problem. So if I'm speculating now, this is my opinion. I think if Showtime Shawn Porter wins, they might call the mandatory, and then you might see Shawn Showtime Porter versus Danny Garcia, the rematch. I think that will probably take place. I don't think they'll be. I think it's a 50-50 deal. They might step aside depending on the numbers, kind of numbers he do with Errol Spence, or they might say no. They might not grant the obsession. They might call for the mandatory for Shawn Showtime Porter and Danny Garcia to fight. So, in other words, Danny Garcia is sitting in a prime position. He's mandated to fight the winner of that fight, and I think he's in the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes. Now, if Manny Pacquiao doesn't fight the winner of Spence and Porter, I think the guy he's going to be looking at is Danny Garcia, and that could be a big pay-per-view fight for Danny, and he could get paid handsomely for that fight. So I think he's either that fight. And another thing that's on the horizon that he could possibly fight is Mikey Garcia. Robert Garcia recently did a video saying that's the fight they're looking for. So when you look at those three options, man, Danny Garcia is sitting in the catbird seats, and he will get a significant fight next. Whether it be Shawn Showtime Porter, Errol Spence winner, which could be called by the WBC, and he's the #1 contender, or he wins the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes. Manny Pacquiao says, hey, Errol and Errol wins. He's saying Errol is a big welterweight, A guy that can box, got skill. That's not a good matchup for me. I don't want that fight. Even the Showtime Porter, he's a physical guy. He's gonna put a lot of pressure on him. He's gonna use his size and weight, and maybe to wear down the smaller man and Manny Pacquiao. That might not be a fight he want to look at. Danny Garcia might be a more winnable fight for him. The guy's you know, kind of flat-footed. Guy's got power in both hands, but he's not very fast. But if he's very skilled, and he's underrated in a lot of aspects, but he's not great at one thing, that could be a fight that Manny Pacquiao can win with his speed, in and out movement, punching from different angles, his footwork, which is far superior than to Danny Garcia's flat footwork. He's got, you know, he doesn't have great footwork at all. He's a flat-footed fighter. So that would be a better matchup for Manny Pacquiao. So that could work into Danny Garcia's favor too. Now, and then you got the Mikey Garcia fight. That's the old tradition of boxing. You got the Puerto Rican versus the Mexican fighter, which have always produced great fights and produced great numbers on TV and on pay-per-view. Let's look at the history. You had De La Hoya versus Trinidad, great fight. You had Chavez Sr. versus Hector Camacho, great fight. You know, you had a lot of great fights. You had Cotto Margarita 1 and 2. That's a great fight. So they've had a lot of great fights over the history of boxing, man, featuring Mexican fighter versus Puerto Rican fighter. So that would be fall in line with those fights. Could potentially be a fight of the year candidates. Both fighters come to fight, and both fighters usually put on entertaining fights. So that could be a matchup maybe they could put on in L.A. Staples Center. So what I'm telling you guys is Danny Garcia is in a prime position. He's in a prime position. All right, that's what we say down south, down here in H-Town. He's in the catbird seat. He's in the catbird seat. Believe it or not, you be like, "How he in the catbird seat? He ain't got no belt. When the two top welterweights that he fought, Porter and Thurman, he lost to. Yeah, he lost to him. Very close fights. Could have went either way. But just look at the rankings. You know, I looked at the rankings when I heard Jose Sulaiman came out and said that the winner of that fight of Porter and Spence, the mandatory could be called upon the winner of that fight. I looked at the rankings and I said, Danny Garcia is ranked #1. I see why Jose Sulaiman might be willing to call that mandatory. He's got Danny Garcia in a prime position, #1 contender in the WBC. So he know that's a big money fight for you know, Danny. You know, Danny versus Earl, or Danny versus Sean Porter, Danny versus that would be a big fight. You know, and like I said, you know, either way, even if Earl, you know, like I said, is appealed for that exception and fights Manny Pacquiao, that's a big money fight, man. And I think, like I said, Jose Sulaiman and the WBC would be willing to step aside and delay the mandatory for Earl Manny Pacquiao fight. I'm not so sure for a Manny Pacquiao Sean Porter fight will they be willing to step aside. I think they might actually call that mandatory and want Danny Garcia to get another crack at Showtime Porter, which first fight was very close. I thought Porter pulled it out, but it was a very close fight. So Danny Garcia looked very, very strong in his last fight against Adrian Granados. He said he's got a nutritionist, so he said stamina is much better, so he can start off fights stronger and don't start off as slow as he's done in the past. And maybe and with the punches he's throwing, he feels that there's no welterweight will be able to stand up to his power. So maybe he can feels he can get Porter out of there in the rematch. So that's a fight that could be made if Porter pulls off the upset over Errol Spence. But we'll see what happens, man. But either way, he's got 3 options, and Danny Garcia will be in a significant fight next. This is JB Sports, the man, the myth, the legend. I holla.